Hello and welcome to Comic Book Junkies. I'm Andrew,
And I'm Joe.
and today we're going to be talking about a few topics. We're going to be hitting on the Snyder Cut. Ooh. Then we're going to touch on a personal topic of ours, our top 5 favorite characters each, just so you guys can kind of get a better feel of what we're into, our tastes, and kind of get to know us better. And hopefully it'll be something that you could look into and enjoy yourself. And for the grand finale, we're going to be hitting on Crisis on Infinite Earths. We're going to review the trade paperback from 1985, the seminal event in DC history. So today, Joe, we saw that the Snyder Cut came out just a few days ago. Well, the teaser trailer, that is, that had Wonder Woman in it. We've seen the news regarding Darkseid being teased in it. What were your thoughts?
I'm glad it's finally coming out because the original movie sucked.
Yeah, dude, it was pretty fucking terrible. But you go on any article online and you see a bunch of bots, or apparently they're real people with just too much time on their hands, just saying, release a Snyder Cut. And even DC's like ripping on these people. You see it in like the Harley Quinn show. Some doofus is wearing a Snyder Cut t-shirt. It's like, so they're aware that this BS is going on and they're like, hey, screw it. There's a pandemic. I don't think we have money to finish this. It's not even done, but we're going to just pour money into a crappy movie and see if we can make it a little bit less crappy.
Well, it's a good thing that it's HBO exclusive from what I understand. So usually when they get their hands on things, it's pretty quality stuff. Not to say that this is going to be the best thing I ever seen. I don't think it's going to be a night and day difference from the original movie, but it will be nice to feature Darkseid because a lot of the Justice League movie that we saw in the theaters had Lex Luthor as the main villain, and he didn't cut it, bro.
Yeah, dude, we had freaking evil Mark Zuckerberg fucking pissing in jars and giving it to people. It's like, I'm sorry, what? I've never seen this before. Is this the Social Network Part 2?
You're
What the
right.
hell is this?
Sequel to the Social Network.
So I don't know who's asking for that, but it's like, why did they ever deviate and cut out Darkseid? It's a crapshoot. They're trying to make an Avengers series in like one movie, which they can't do, but the only saving grace would have been having Darkseid in it. Steppenwolf looked like a freaking idiot. The CGI has been terrible. I mean, look at Doomsday. So hopefully Darkseid just doesn't look like a giant fucking turd, but we'll see, bro. At least it'll be something they should be able to fight and not overwhelm like Steppenwolf at the end there anyways. Superman came back. He tried to act like the big blue Boy Scout and sock him in the head, and like apparently that was it. But I don't think it's gonna fix all the casting stuff, like Jesse Eisenberg and Ezra Miller as the Flash. That shit don't jive with me.
Me neither. It's going to be hard to tell until it actually comes out, but can't be worse than the original.
Yeah, I'll give it a watch and feel probably the exact same way.
Cool. We should start rolling into top 5 characters.
Sounds good to me. I'll let you start off, actually.
You want me to start from 5 or 1?
Whatever you prefer.
All right, I'll start with my number 5, so we'll build up to it. I'd say as far as top 5 goes, Batman's going to be my number 5.
Ooh.
Reason being, I think there's more characters that are interesting than Batman, but for any comic book nerd or people that keep up with the comic book continuity, a lot of the best DC stories, both movies and comics, are Batman titles. I couldn't tell you why, but it seems like all the best runs are Batman related. So you usually get the best artists, the best writers on his titles, and it always comes out a polished product. So I always look forward to seeing Batman, regardless if it's movies or comic.
For sure. I have him on my list as well. I won't tell you where yet, but you want my number 5 while we're at it?
Yeah, let's hear it.
So mine's a little bit off the beaten path. I kind of want to throw a curveball at you, but if you know me, you know that it's pretty true. Number 5, The Crow.
No fucking way.
The Crow's sweet. A lot
All
of
the
people,
way up there?
Yeah, dude, he's sweet. I talk about him more than I probably should. And I was thinking about it. I was like, well, what characters do I talk about more than others? I saw the movie. I own his first appearance. I have some of his original run in comic. It's goofy. It's a weird choice, but I'm a goofy, weird dude. So it makes a lot of sense.
Did you watch the movie first?
I was exposed through the movie first. Then I went back and did my research on the comics. The movie, cult classic, obviously. Super cool. R.I.P. Brandon Lee. And I don't think they should reboot it either, but that's destined to fail.
For those who haven't watched it, Bruce Lee's son's in it. I won't spoil anything about the actual content, but Bruce Lee's son dies in the making of the movie. So you hear there's a curse in their family. Definitely something to check out.
Yeah, that, and it just has local ties to the creator James O'Barr. He wrote the story set in Detroit. He used to work Caliber Press in the area. Seeing as we're from Michigan, it's cool seeing local ties on. They're using like local streets and stuff in the comic.
That's something I didn't know. That's pretty cool.
On to your 4?
Yeah, my number 4 is going to be be Spider-Man. Again, not because of the actual character himself, but the Rogues Gallery. I think he's got the best villains out of both Marvel and DC. It's going to be between him and Batman, but growing up, everything I watched, he was fighting a different villain, whether it was the Green Goblin, Mysterio, Sandman, Kraven the Hunter. The list goes on and on and on, and it just seems like there's always something interesting going on in the Spider-Man universe, so that's definitely going to be my number 4 spot.
Right on. Yeah, he's not in that spot for me, but he is also on my list. So I'm just going to clear it up since you already spoke on my next two. I have Spider-Man at 3 and Batman at 4, pretty much for the same reasons that you do, but I'll let you go to your number 3 actually, and then we'll sync back up.
Cool. 3 and 4 was a toss-up, but I'm going to go with the Hulk, even though he doesn't have the Rogues Gallery that Spider-Man does. I like that he's very Jekyll and Hyde. He's not very much a superhero, but a very conflicted character. Also something I grew up watching a lot and thought was really cool. I don't know, more recent run on Hulk has probably been the best comic book series I've ever read in my life, Immortal Hulk.
Sure.
So there's just a lot with this character to explore, so that's why he made my number 3 spot.
Yo, I can't argue with that.
How about you?
Oh, for 3, I had Batman, but you know what? I'm going to go ahead and take charge and take number 2. My number 2, this shouldn't be any surprise to you, it's Deathstroke. So pretty much the main dude, I touched on it last time. He pretty much is one of the driving forces that got me into comics as it is. Through young exposure, seeing him as just Slade on the Teen Titans animated show. Always thought he was badass then. He had a cool design. I don't know why he was always fucking around with teenagers, but he seems like he should have better shit to do. Guess he didn't. I don't know. He was always badass dude. Doesn't have like the craziest power set. He's just an enhanced metahuman type person. He's not flying around or doing any other crazy shit. He's just got a sword, a gun, and he's pretty sweet and snarky. He's always talking shit to somebody.
Sweet and snarky.
Yeah, that was like my first major key. New Teen Titans issue 2. My girl got that for me way back when I started collecting, and playing as him in Injustice really got the ball rolling on me actually buying comic books as individual copies.
Yeah, and I wouldn't downplay it either. He's only got the sword and the boots, but
swashbuckler boots.
Yeah, he's one of the strong DC comic book villains, actually.
Oh yeah, for sure.
He's always going toe to toe with Green Arrow, with Batman, and he can definitely hold his own.
I mean, he usually beats Batman's ass. I mean, in his own solo series, he did. Knocked his ass out, fight on a tower, slammed him into a bookcase and told him to pretty much shove it and just dip. It's sweet.
So I guess I'll reveal my number 2. That's going to be Lex Luthor. Had to bring a villain into the mix and don't have a more favorite villain than Lex Luthor. Magneto makes probably a close second to him as far as villains go. But because Superman is probably the most iconic comic book character ever created, they had to give him the best villain in comics. And I think for being a human and powerless, Lex Luthor does a good job of going toe-to-toe with Superman. So that's he makes my number 2 spot.
Bald, spiteful ass businessman. He says
some background for him too. When he first came out, he was actually like an evil scientist. The creators of Superman, or maybe a creative team above them, were thinking like a scientist. Well, people are associating businessmen as being evil and bad, and they transitioned him from a scientist to a businessman. So I thought that was pretty cool, actually. It was a good transition in his character and made for a good villain type.
Do you know in his first appearance too, he also wasn't a bald ass? He used to have a little mop on him, and then a few issues in, they're like, nah, dude, we need to make him more badass. So they made his ass bald, and now he's even more pissed. But yeah, dude, I can't hate that pick at all. He's sweet.
All right, well, let's hear your number 1, Burger.
Oh, number 1 is so obvious. It's that boy Shazam, or should I say the original Captain Marvel. So he hasn't gotten his due since, about like the late 40s, but I mean, back then he was that boy. I mean, it's all about the present. Back then he was outselling Superman like it was nobody's business. Fawcett Comics went out of business because DC's like, bro, you just jacked our shit. You just slapped a different name on it. And then Fawcett had to cease business. DC came in, bought that shit, shelved him till the 70s. And then he's never really had a run to define him since he's been integrated into DC. He's on his 3rd solo series since the 40s. He had one in the 70s, one in the 90s, and then he has the one that Jeff Johns is writing right now, but that's going to end at issue 15. So RIP in pieces there. He's one of the characters that could go toe to toe with Superman. Well, at least he used to be able to. And nowadays they won't let that happen. But between him and just all of his supporting characters, he's got cool villains too. Most people are are kind of in the dark on him, but I think that he's way more badass and deserves way more credit. He's just like a 10, 12-year-old, whatever age they're going with nowadays, who just says the magic word, and then he becomes an all-powerful being and survive in the vacuum of space, don't need to eat nothing. He's just like invulnerable as shit. He's magic. That alone should let him beat Superman's ass, but it doesn't. He's got cool villains. Most people don't really think of him that way. He's real campy, he's real cheesy, but that's the stuff I like. He's got Dr. Sivana, who's actually pretty badass, and he's got all of his little shithead kids. And then he's got Mr. Mind, just a tiny little caterpillar wearing glasses. Very unassuming, doesn't make sense, but he's even more powerful for no reason. Back in the day, it was cool. He's out there punching Nazis, he's out there fighting wars, and then he's still beating up goofy stuff like Crocodile or Gator Men in suits and all that stuff. What's not to like?
Back then, it was more wartime entertainment, and that was the perfect thing to be reading back then.
God bless. How about you?
Mine's probably going to be pretty obvious to you too, but my number one pick is going to be Superman. I touched on it a little bit in the first episode, is that when I first started collecting comics, it was because my older brother got me introduced to it. But around that same time, I was also watching Smallville for the first time. May not be the best show you ever watch, but it's definitely one of my favorite shows. Growing up in a small town just resonated with me.
Just being a corn-fed boy.
Yeah.
I
So
wish Lana would take me to the dance.
Exactly. That's all it had going for it. It was super simple. It wasn't over the top or over your head. It was just about being a good person and
real wholesome.
Very wholesome. His heart and his mind's in the right spot. And we don't see enough of that kind of leadership nowadays. So that's why Superman's my favorite character.
Right on, dude. Well, I think that's a pretty good list, if I say so myself. I mean, obviously we had a couple things in common, but we had a few stark contrasts. But how can you go wrong with Batman, Spider-Man, Superman? All of the characters you listed are in like the top of what I enjoy. But just to narrow it down to what explains who I am as a collector, I had to leave them out. I had a few other like honorable mentions, like Moon Knight, a little bit more obscure but badass, and the Flash, the Barry Allen Flash specifically. Characters like that. There's just so many characters, it's hard to just choose 5.
And I hate to be generic by picking a lot of these mainstream characters, but there's a reason that they're the best. I guess if I had to do an honorable mention, I like the Punisher.
Right on.
Captain America, but those are also kind of mainstream. I guess if we want to get a little more obscure, Swamp Thing.
Hell yeah, dude.
Yeah, but that's a good introduction to our interest in comics. I guess we can start touching on Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Yeah, dude.
It was the first ever event comic for DC and Marvel Comics, as far as I understand it. It was in 1985, and the creative team was Marv Wolfman and George Perez. A little background on both of them. They wrote one of the most iconic runs in comics. It was the New Teen Titans before they started to do the Crisis on Infinite Earths, so they already had a pretty good chemistry together. It was made as a 12-issue series, just like Watchmen. It was DC's 50th anniversary when they approved for George Perez and Marv Wolfman to do this series. Marv Wolfman, when he was getting introduced to comics, he was reading a lot of Justice League of America stuff, and prior to the JLA, there was a group called the Justice Society of America, which was their 1940s counterpart. So it was kind of like the Justice League, but a different set of characters in another dimension. And it was his goal to merge the past characters with the present and the future characters all in one story. When he first brought it to DC Comics' attention, they didn't want to do it because they figured what would be more profitable is series like Action Comics and Detective Comics, which is what Batman and Superman mainly featured in back then, because those stories would run to issue 400, 500, 600, etc. So they didn't really want to do a 12-issue series, but because it was kind of difficult to merge old readers while also making it interesting for new readers to jump on, they had to make all these stories make sense. So like, why does Superman have multiple stories? Why does Batman have multiple stories? So George Perez, Marv Wolfman came together and made a story that would tie the whole universe together.
Yeah, I mean, George wasn't even the first choice to be on there. I think, I forget who was the original choice, but George got the call and he's like, hell yeah, dude, let's get it going. And I honestly couldn't be more pumped because they're one of my favorite creative teams historically. Because like I said, they created one of my favorite characters, Deathstroke, and they had that impeccable run on New Teen Titans. But who better to steer the ship than them? But as a just general overview, pretty much it's just your typical, well, what started the trend of heroes fighting heroes, heroes uniting, heroes fighting bigger enemy, bing, bang, boom. Yeah, I mean, at the very very beginning, we'll just start there. Pariah shows up, just some dude. He's always popping up on Earths that are dying. He's just sitting there. He's bitching and moaning. He's like, oh no, why do I gotta watch that? And then he just stands there, watches everybody just get murked and turned into oblivion. And then he just dips. He's like, not again. And then boom, he's gone. But the first planet he does that on, which annoys me, Earth 3, the home of the crime syndicate, so pretty much like the evil Justice League, and Alexander Luthor Jr., who will be way more important later. So he sees all of them get murked. Then Luthor Sr., who is a hero, the only hero on this planet, he knows that the world's ending. He goes back home. He's married to Lois on this universe. And just like baby Superman on Krypton, he sends Alexander Luthor Jr. away in a spaceship and sends him off to our universe in order to save the world, well, to save his life. I'm just going to go back and dive in a little bit just past that. I'll just give you the abridged version of how I read the book, because this book is wordy as all hell. It's a thick ass read. If you're new to comics, it's definitely good to brush up on your comic history and read this, but also it's kind of a challenge if you're used to modern comics, because by today's standards, it's a little boring. Not hating on the material at all, but like it's definitely really wordy, and like I'd say like half the issues are just set up. It does what it was intended to do. After like Luthor Jr. gets sent off to another universe, we meet Harbinger. She's recruiting heroes from all over time and space. We got Solovar chilling out in Gorilla City. We got Dawnstar from the Legion. Got Firebrand from the All-Star Squadron. We got Blue Beetle from the Charlton universe that they were trying to integrate into the main universe. And then they got Psycho Pirate's Snake Ass. And I don't know why the hell they needed him. I mean, I get it. He can control emotions. He's real powerful and all that. But I mean, you just picked up the dude from a loony bin and he's a freaking like snake. Can't trust his ass worth of nothing.
For those of you who've watched Transformers, he's like the Starscream of Transformers. Yeah, no, I thought he featured some actually pretty cool characters. The Spectre was pretty heavily featured towards the end. There was a panel where he had Swamp Thing. He had the original Charlton characters, to your point. He had a short Jonah Hex story, and he even brought up Uncle Sam for whatever reason.
Yo, Uncle Sam's sweet. He's just floating on that space rock just with like Superman and everybody. And I'm like, what's he doing here?
No, but the task of having to get like every hero and villain involved, I think that they did an amazing job in that sense. However, to your point, it was very wordy. DC was very much contemplating a 12-issue series, so I think that they were just trying to get as much in as they could between those 12 issues, and the art was so amazing, and all those texts, the panels, what do you call it, the speech bubbles, they were taking away from the actual art because there was just too much context on each page, and it wasn't even bad writing either, so I don't mean to slander it, because Wolfman did a great job of understanding the personality of these characters. He had a good voice for the characters, but there was just too much going on. And the reason why this wasn't our first episode is because it's hard for new readers to read. The reason being is you get introduced to every single DC character almost at one time, and not knowing who these characters are, it seems a little confusing. Yeah. So it was a good way to merge old heads with new readers, but it wasn't a good place for new readers to start.
Especially when you're seeing like different versions of a hero you may be familiar with. Like Luthor Jr. is not the same as main universe Luthor. And then when you got Silver Fox Superman hanging around with OGs like regular Superman, it's like, hey. And then and then it's like, if it's a jumping on point, they were really pulling not super obscure characters, but they were just pick whoever. These weren't all A-listers that were on like the teams to go check out the tuning fork towers that were set up. Why is like Solovar and Atlan and like all these other people just hanging out? And like,
there were a lot of characters I could not give a fuck about.
I get the point, because it's kind of like, hey, we're touching everybody, so all of these types of people and their teammates are affected, but also play the hits, dude. That, and I just kind of like how during this time, how they set up Firestorm. He was used a lot more than he is currently, obviously, but he was almost their like analog of Spider-Man. He's like that younger hero who's, you know, kind of witty, kind of teenage, almost like a young adult dude just goofing. And
Speaking of Firestorm, I like at the beginning of the series when Psycho Pirate hypnotizes Killer Frost to be in love with Firestorm. Make a good advertisement for Fire and Ice Condom.
I'm sure that's what they're thinking about.
Yeah, so they did a good job with some of the obscure characters. It was just pretty overwhelming for new readers.
Oh, for sure.
What'd you think of the art?
Art was great. I can't complain about the art. George Perez has come up with a bunch of different designs, and just like his illustration skills, no matter what book he's drawn, have always been great. I mean, anytime Perez is around, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, I love the art myself. His attention to detail on like the costumes and the characters' mannerisms were spot on. Other than there being like a lot of speech bubbles for the texts, I thought he did a great job on the title.
Oh yeah, for sure. One of my favorite things is once we finally do meet the Anti-Monitor, dude pretty much just shows up. They created him. And I mean, he's got a cool design for the most part. I mean, he looks pretty badass, especially in his first incarnation before his ass gets blown up. But what's up with like his face?
All right.
I mean, the Monitor has those sweet mutton chops and kind of looks like he was like a hot dog left in the microwave for too long. But with and then we've got the Anti-Monitor. You'd think he'd just be the opposite. But no, he looks like a giant, I don't know, like remote control with like the teeth of like a whale. You know what I mean? They look like bristles. Like, what the hell is this dude on? So
definitely
like, no wonder he's pissed, dude. He's ugly.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, dude, but he's been training so long in his mom's basement. He's actually pretty strong with the nunchucks, because when everybody comes to go whoop his ass, they're like, bro, we heard you're out here talking shit. And he's like, run it. And
it's like you at ping pong.
Yeah, dude, anybody can get it. It's like out of nowhere, everyone's like bitching and moaning. They're checking the vibrational tuning towers, yippity doo-dah. Well, apparently they could get over real quick as they go fly into fucking space. There's a giant floating rock castle, and they just fly in there acting like they know the joint, and they get their ass beat by rock demons again. They're getting beat up by shadows in the first half. They're getting beat up by rock demons in the second half. It's like they're just getting tossed up left and right. Everybody that isn't named Superman and Supergirl is just getting socked right in the face. They're flying up in there, and that's when we see shit really hit the fan. See Anti-Monitor, he's about to murk Superman. Supergirl's like, hell nah, get your ass away. And then she like thinks she beat his ass. She turns her back, and he's like, dumbass, shoots her, and there you go, death of Supergirl. And dude, she was dead for a long time. She didn't come back until what, the 2000s?
Yeah,
like she stayed dead. And
to play on that was probably the best Supergirl story ever written.
Well, yeah, that was the peak of it. She had all of the character development you could probably have, and then she died for like 20 years. So it's like
so, rest in peace.
R.I.P. in pieces. She wasn't the only one. Barry's ass died too.
Yeah. Fun fact too, the creative team made a pact before they started writing this to try not to kill off any of like the JSA heroes, as they vowed not to murder any of the characters that were created before their time.
Makes sense.
I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, Barry Allen too in this. Supergirl dies, but what they said they put in the story would allow for the coming and going of Barry Allen. And I reread all 12 issues before doing this podcast with you, and I could not find it in the text. So that'll be something for fans to look out for if it's not already on the internet. But he put some kind of plot hole in there where Barry Allen can come and go as he pleases, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, actually. So I'll have to look for it, unless it's just going straight over my head right now. But Barry went out in a noble fashion. I actually liked his death way better than Supergirl's, to be honest. He was just sitting there talking smack with the Anti-Monitor and the Psycho Pirate the whole time, but he breaks free and he knows what he has to do. Because I mean, the whole rest of the comic, he's been trying to warn everybody by coming back in time and telling them, yo, shit's about to hit the fan, you need to help. And nobody knows what's going on, because how is he doing that? Why won't he listen to us? Can't hear us, blah, blah, blah. But he runs to the antimatter cannon, and he just runs as fast as ever has, and just straight up like disintegrates and like blows up the cannon, which saves everybody. But he made the ultimate sacrifice. But honestly, I haven't read enough of the run, but it's set up like a fan favorite, Wally West taking over the Flash mantle, which was also really good character development that has also kind of gone by the wayside ever since pretty much 2011. And when you think about it, like I have that weird nostalgia nostalgia for Silver Age books, even though I didn't collect until like 2013. But the Flash that we grew up with was Wally West on the Justice League TV show and everything like that. Barry wasn't back until Jeff Johns started doing his thing again. So it's like, really, I'm more familiar with Wally than I am Barry, but I have like this weird attachment, or like, I don't know what it is. I just really like the Silver Age versions, but really Wally is such a good character too, and he's been fleshed out in his own right since.
I agree. I think that the death of Flash was a little more impactful than the death of Supergirl in this story, because the death of Supergirl was more of a surprise, where the death of Barry Allen was more meant to be.
And I like that during like this whole time, everybody knows the multiverse that they're all living in. Existence as they know it is about to pretty much end, but Brainiac's still rolling around in his like little skull spaceship being a dickhead, and so is Luthor. They just don't take breaks from being dicks.
They're always up to no good. Hilarious.
And there's something about that I respect. They stay on their grind no matter what. They're like, we're not even going to have anything to rule over, but we need to rule it before it vanishes. It's like, K.
Right. All the villains are pairing up with the heroes in this story to make sure that they can destroy the Anti-Monitor, who's taken over all of the different multiverses, and Lex Luthor and Brainiac are only thinking about what they can rule.
Dude, they were thinking about what they could rule. They were only trying to rule what they could beforehand. Only after the Spectre gets involved and he's like, bro, this shit's serious, are they like, fine, we'll call a truce. Now you call a truce? You had to get like the literal embodiment of like God's wrath to tell you to fucking cut the shit for a minute.
All right, even Darkseid joined the good side for this fight. He wasn't even scheming like Brainiac and Lex.
I know. Well, Darkseid's not like a dumbass. It's like, he's like, bro, am I gonna exist, or should I just have one more evil plot? Maybe you should try and live first. So I don't know, dude. But I do like that the Spectre is important in this. They've kind of nerfed his ass today. He doesn't seem to nearly have like the same power level. I mean, I guess it depends on the writer, but he's going toe to toe with Anti-Monitor, and he's got all the like magic users like linking up to power his ass up too. I found that really cool. And then just like everything goes white, and you think the few pages after that, you're like, oh, cool, shit's normal. And then it's like you get through like the rest of that issue, and you're like, ah, god damn it, here comes Will Teeth again. And he's just even more angry, and he somehow got bigger.
That's funny.
And on top of that, I like that it's still pretty much a giant Superman's gonna save the day type of thing, because not only do we have main Superman, we have Silver Fox Superman, and we have goddamn Superboy Prime. And it's like, how many more Supermen do we need to fight him? But I mean, who else is gonna fight him, really? But
they got all the Boy Scouts together.
Yeah, Superboy Prime before Jeff Johns got his hands on him and turned him into an edgy teenager. It's like, because I mean, after this crisis, we still had two more crises. We had Final Crisis, and we have Identity Crisis or something like that. It's like, Jesus. No, Infinite Crisis, and then Final Crisis, and then it's like, hey, but Final Crisis doesn't mean Final Crisis. We know there's going to be another crisis. There's always a crisis. We need to reshuffle the hand every 10 years old nowadays.
As long as comic books keep coming out, there will be another crisis.
Damn right. Especially if like Jeff Johns is alive and has anything to do with it. And I mean, that's fine with me.
I wouldn't recommend reading any of the sequels to this. And there's some other creative teams that have kind of made their own version of Crisis afterwards that are worth reading. But this is definitely a good place for people to maybe, once they've read a little bit of comics, to read, because it makes the whole universe make sense.
Yeah, you definitely want to have a familiarity with at least some of the characters, at least the main characters, in order to kind of get the full scope of what's going on in this. And you might want to know a little bit of comics history too, and all of the issues with continuity that they had up until this point. Because you figure everything from the 30s into Flash 123, when they introduced the multiverse, up until this point where they're like, nah, we got to go back to one universe. Then they have more crises where they're like, hey, we do the multiverse again. And then it's hard to keep up with, but Crisis is really like a seminal point. Like, you can differentiate eras of DC as pre-crisis, post-crisis, stuff like that. It'll help give you a context of when you'll hear discussion of books and like their effects on continuity and where everything fits in the greater universe.
Regardless if you're a Marvel or DC fan, this is the first event in comic books, the first big event anyway, so you definitely want to check that out. That being said, what would you rate it?
I would give it
on a
boob scale today. I'm gonna go 3.5, and I give it 3.5 just because it wasn't wasn't a bad read. It was more of an average read, but the impact and the importance surrounding it is so important that I don't hate the material. It's just that it's really wordy. I'd give it higher scores if it was a little bit less wordy and it kind of was flowing a little bit more smoothly, but it was a great read overall, and I think it's essential. How about you?
I'd give it a 7 out of 10 boobs. The reason being is because it's so important. It's almost like reading a history book, right? You're bored of it, but it's also crucial to understanding everything that's going on. So because of how important it is and how well the art was done, even though the writing was a bit much, the writing was still good. That's the reason I'd give it a 7 out of 10. It was pretty confusing for new readers, so I didn't like that aspect to it, and I didn't like how wordy it was because of how much they were trying to fit in that short amount of time. But otherwise, it was a good read. It had its parts. It makes everything else make sense, so it's essential to read it, but it's not the best thing you'll read in comics, so I would read a few other things first before you dive into the past.
Definitely. And on that note, just want to hear back from you guys. If you're out there, if you want to supply us with your top 5 favorite characters, whether you're new, just who you're familiar with or who you're interested in, or if you're a seasoned vet, what your top 5 favorite characters are, and if you have any specific stories that you think would be interesting for us to read.
There's an overwhelming amount of interest, feedback, and something that you want us to review or read, we'd be happy to do it. Next episode, what we'll do is review The Death of Superman, my favorite character in general. If you like what we're talking about, definitely tune in next episode.
Later, guys.
Deuces.